Today's reading is from Amos chapter 1 and chapter 5. The words of Amos, who was among the shepherds of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of King Uzziah of Judah and in the days of King Jeroboam, son of Joash of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. And he said, "The Lord roars from Zion and utters his voice from Jerusalem. The pastures of the shepherds wither, and the top of Carmel dries up. Seek good and not evil, that you may live. And so the Lord, the God of hosts, will be with you, just as you have said. Hate evil and love good, and establish justice in the gate. It may be that the Lord, the God of hosts, will be gracious to the remnants of Joseph. I despise your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offerings of well-being of your fatted animals, I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream." Word of God, word of life.
Thanks be to God.
Having trouble with your connectedness. We have a whole bunch of this kind of wasted connectedness right here. So we'll have to think that. In the name of our Lord. Amen. I need you to be kind of a little bit ready today, because there is no way in the world to be able to preach this without offending somebody. And if you're not offended, we probably should take a good look at how we have kind of talked ourselves into la-la land, where we don't think that the word really connects for us. Because you see, in the story that we have today, this story that we've been flowing through over the last couple of months, the people were slaves in Egypt, right? They were slaves in Egypt, and they were freed from being slaves in Egypt. They were brought out of Egypt into a promised land. And one of the things that they were told is, don't forget what it feels like to be a slave. Don't forget. But now we're a few hundred years past that. Times are really, really good overall in Israel. The sheep trade is going well. A lot of tourists probably coming in. And what's happened? They have forgotten. They've forgotten what it is like to be a slave. And not only have they forgotten what it's like to be a slave, but they've flipped, so that now they are the ones who are inflicting oppression on other people. It's so easy to do. Just this last week, we celebrated no, we didn't celebrate. We really weird. We recognized the 100th anniversary. Remember, we were talking about the 500th anniversary of the Reformation, right? Well, this last week, on the 7th, 8th of November, we recognized the 100th anniversary of another amazing event that took place and changed all of our lives. And what was that event? The Russian Revolution. You don't think it affected your life at all? But one of the things that I think is fascinating is that one of the big supporters of Lenin during that whole thing was a man by the name of Maxim Gorky. And very quickly after the Russian Revolution, Maxim Gorky, who was not afraid to speak out, said, "This is very strange, because the oppressed have now become the oppressors." I think it's something that we have this tendency to do, where we kind of have this this idea that we think that, oh, if we can just free people from their oppression, if we can just free people from all of the terrible things that others are doing to them, then, I mean, even the Russian aristocrats thought, some of them thought, oh, the peasants would be wonderful because they'll all come dancing out of the forests and they'll dance and sing songs around fires, just like all of our fairy tales about the Russian peasants told us, and that's not what happened. But you see, it's more than just what happened 100 years ago. It's more than what happened 500 years ago. And it's more than what happened all the way through our history. We have this tendency to become part of the system. A system where we forget. A system where we become, sometimes complicitly, sometimes without thinking about it, a system that lacks justice, that is bereft of righteousness. Who are we? Are we willing? Are we willing to take a deep, deep, deep look at what we're doing? You see, we hear this word justice, we hear the word righteousness, we hear it being talked about by Chris, and it really sounded nice when it was coming from Chris, but it's an incredibly deep word. Where's Gretchen again? Because I used her when we were talking to the choir. The whole idea, stand up, Gretchen. The whole idea, when you use that word justice, is exactly what we were talking about with the strings of connectedness. That the Hebrew people understood that Gretchen, if something happens to Gretchen, if Gretchen is suffering, then there is, even if we can't see the strings of connectedness, then there is an energy, a power that exists between us. It's the power of God's love. It's the power of God bringing us together as brother and sister. And if she is in pain, if she is suffering from an injustice, I should not be able to help but feel that pain. And feeling that pain and knowing what's going on, I, as a person who is connected to her, needs to do everything that I can. Not just for my own sake, so that I feel less pain, but for her sake, to stop what's happening. Okay, it's not that anything horrible is happening to her that I know of right now, but that's what we're talking about here, and that's God's justice is bigger, because a lot of times we'll think of justice and we kind of tend to think of this surface sort of thing. Right? Justice means, oh, let me, if Gretchen is hungry, let me throw Gretchen a sandwich. Oh, I feel better. No! Because you really haven't addressed what's actually going on. You haven't allowed yourself to take that scary step, that challenging step of going deeper and trying to figure out what is really going on. And how can we get this whole world working together so that we are all working together, that we are feeling things together and working for each other's benefit. Oh, people, if you read what's going on, and if you weren't throwing up in your throat just a little bit this week, when you realized how easy it is to go blah, 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 I'm a Christian, blah, 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 I love God, blah, 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 I assault 14-year-old girls, blah, 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 blah. Do you think God was particularly happy at that moment as all of a sudden this paragon of Christianity? Now I understand that it's an accusation, but look at the excuses. Well, There's nothing in the Ten Commandments that tells me that I shouldn't do something like that. Well, Mary was probably only 13 and Joseph was 30. Doesn't it make you burn a little bit with fury? That kind of thing would be used? Blah, 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 blah. I will make Christianity fit into whatever it works for me. And here's the kicker. As long as it doesn't hold me accountable. Blah, 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 blah. Amos ran into it in a big way. Blah, 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 blah. Yes, we are doing religious things. Yes, we are doing acts of worship and we're singing songs. It's so amazing because in the Hebrew that we have, God doesn't say, notice in our text it says, I reject. It doesn't say in Hebrew, I reject. It says, I am puking it back in your face. Lovely, but it gets the feeling, right? A little bit better. God is listening to all of this stuff, and God just can't stand it. What happened? What happened to this people that I brought out of slavery in Egypt? What happened to this people that I love so dearly? And now you go through all the motions, but nothing changes. If you are going to have real justice, if you are going to have real righteousness, it can't stay on the surface. Easy to look at somebody else, right? Much tougher when it comes home to roost. What is it that we say a lot of times? And we say it with good intent. If something happens to somebody and we don't quite know what to say to them, what is the phrase that we'll often use?
Thoughts and prayers.
Thoughts and prayers. Has thoughts and prayers become blah, blah, blah? It can be. See, notice good intent. And if I know that I'm going through a really hard time, and Libby emails me or talks to me, she says, wow, Wes, my thoughts and prayers are really with you. That does feel good. We're not talking about something that is on the surface immediately evil. But if it becomes blah, 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 this popped up. A bunch of innocent people get murdered. What should we do? We always ask that. What should we do? Was the murderer Muslim? If the answer is yes, then travel bans, war in Afghanistan, positive action, right? If the answer is no, then the question is, was the murderer Hispanic? Yes, build a wall, send him back. No, then the question was the murderer black? If the answer is yes, then more policemen, more prisons. If the answer is no, then the question is, was the murderer white? And if the answer is yes, thoughts and prayers. Sin, brokenness, runs so deep in all of us. And almost every time, we're going to find a place where it just comes too close for us to have to approach, look at, or do something about the evil that lies within each one of us. What do I care, says God? What do I care for all your songs? What do I care for all of your prayers? What do I care for all of your religious activities if they're not connected to your real life? What do I care, says God, if you're walking out these doors and everything you've heard here disappears? What do I want, says God? Justice. Justice. Walk a life. Walk a life where you feel and live the reality that you are connected. Walk and live a life where you are constantly willing to challenge yourself. Have I slipped? Have I slipped into blah, 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 blah faith? Where it's easy, where it doesn't challenge at all any of the things that I am doing, fits exactly into the agenda that makes me feel good. And meanwhile, people are suffering because of what I'm doing. This is not a distant God, folks. Not distant at all. And out of love, out of that incredibly passionate love, God is willing to get mad at us too. Because God is not some kind of an indulgent parent that just kind of says, whatever, just keep going. Oh, I could never say no. A real love will also say, enough. Do something.